Hello, welcome. Today we're going to be creating a character from scratch. And I'm going to start by creating a new canvas. So what usually happens is when you tap the create, it gives you this, and then you can go ahead and add. So I'm going to call this character 1. And I usually go over here and change my canvas color. So I usually select the paint bucket and put it on a little bit of gray so I can see exactly where the canvas is. You can see here, if you didn't change the canvas color, it's going to be a little bit, it's going to be the same as the background. It's all going to be white, so you're not going to know where your canvas starts or ends, but now you can see. All right, not too many tools, but I'm going to go ahead and choose the pencil, the sketching pencil. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this, you know what, let's leave it in landscape. Let's leave it in landscape so you guys can have a better view. And what I'm going to create kind of like a panda-ish character kind of thingy that is going to be going on. So what's going to happen is it's going to come from shapes like I usually do with all my creations. I start with, simple shapes. And since the pandas are kind of, goofy, I'm going to make him large down here. So it's going to be having a big kind of tummy, kind of roundish tummy. And I'm going to give him short, skimpy legs like this. All right. So I start off with simple, easy shapes, and then I try to go from there and, try to add on a couple of details. But at the beginning, it's just simple shapes like this. And you can see it's too big for the scene, so we're gonna make him a little bit smaller. Go back to my pencil, and what's gonna happen is now I'm gonna go in. It's gonna be facing us kind of like 3D kind of ish. Like it's gonna be giving us a threes. His right hand is going to be a little bit in the front, and his left hand is going to be a little bit in the back. So this is why I put this particular line to be cutting across and giving me more space on the left side than it is on the on his left side. All right, so what's going to happen is I'm going to go and start putting a few details now. I'm going to leave this middle line here, and I'm going to go around his shoulder and give him kind of longish arms around there. So the one on this other side is going to be a little bit, we're going to see just a little bit of it. And usually I start off like this, and afterwards when I start animating, or from this section, I go on to the next section where I'm supposed to be inking. And on the inking part is where I start putting a few more details on that side, and that's when I start thinking about what kind of animation that I want him to be doing, and I put all that into consideration. That's where you start drawing some parts in front of the others, and you draw kind of wholesome parts, and that's when you start to also think about what parts are going to be moving and what parts are not going to be moving. So now we're adding a little bit more details, so I'm going to go ahead and give him roundish ears. That's going to be a little bigger than the other one because the other one is hidden a little bit. And pandas have a cute little button nose. So this is going to be our nose line here. So I'm going to go ahead and give him kind of a cute little button nose. And the mouth is going to be coming off like a cat mouth. Like right there, because it's kind of like a cat family kind of thingy here in the face. And now pandas have really something that is very unique to them, which is their eyes. They have big circles going around their eyes, kind of a raccoon mask. So we're going to try to show that. And so you can see here, by the way, let me first mention this before we go any further. You can see this part here is a little bigger than this part here, and it's all because of the perspective. Now his left eye is going to be a little bit farther in, and his right eye is going to be coming out at us. So which means this eye has to be bigger than this eye. So this is where all your principles of drawing come into play, which means you have to consider perspective, and you have to consider all a little bit of human, a little bit of animal anatomy here. So this eye is going to be going around there. And now I'm also putting into consideration his nose, because his nose comes out a little bit like a nose of a dog. This is why I have this cutting across like that. And I'm going to have this cutting across over there. Still thinking about perspective. And I'm going to make it go a little bit receding in the back, just like that. So when you look at both of them, you can see the one on his left is going in a little bit, and the one on his right is coming out at us. It's bigger compared to the other one. And I like his smile here. Give him a little bit of this. He doesn't have to be a perfect panda, because it's kind of just a cartoon character based on kind of a panda-ish kind of bear. So now you can see we're already starting to have a character pop off the screen, and this is where now all the fun starts, because we're gonna start kind of adding those tiny tiny details that usually come out really nice, and we're gonna start putting a lot of things into consideration. For example, you want to make this ear come off of his head a little bit like that, and you want to start thinking about this creases here. And we're going to give him a longer jaw to come where his chin is. And on the other side, of course, thinking about perspective is going to be a little bit smaller. But this side has to think about those creases on his cheek as well. And his hand is going to be popping off of his shoulder as usual. And we'll come down here. We're going to give him big paws. So the paws will go backwards. Like so. Alright. So those will go backwards like so. And on this side, it's already into position like that. A little smaller because it's farther away again from us. And now, remember, black and white pandas. So we're going to choose this side. Still here, you're going to see this side is going to be smaller than this side. This side is wider because it's closer to us. Perspective, perspective, perspective. Perspective makes things look actually real and more beautiful. And you can see we have that in there. And his legs are going to be popping off of his belly here. Still, we're following our center line. This is going to come in here. And now I'm thinking about what type of fit I'm going to give him. So this has to be a little bit shorter because it's in the back. And this has to be a little longer. And I'm going to give him kind of these goofy paws for the feet. Cut them off around here. Give it about 3 toes on the right one. Give it some strong nails. I don't know if pandas have strong nails, but I'm going to give it some strong nails right there. And all this, I'm just imagining and drawing it off of my head, which is a very, very bad, concept of drawing. You have to have some kind of reference if you want to draw things that are real, because whatever you think sometimes is in your brains, most of the times comes out really different. It's whatever we think we know sometimes is very, very far from, the real thing. But now, the fact that we're just drawing cartoons, it doesn't matter that much. We're not realistically drawing. But if you are realistically drawing a panda, you'll realize it will be something totally, totally different from this. We're going to give him a little bit of hair. I want it to go this way like this. Yeah, a little bit of hair. And of course, as I mentioned before, he has this big raccoon kind of mask eyes, but the real eye is in the middle there. It's in there, kind of small like that. And on this side, it's going to be even more smaller. It's going to be even smaller. Now, this one is going to come out actually good, because what's going to happen, this entire mask is going to be shaded black. And it will leave that little white, and then we'll have a little bit of an eye in there popping out. And remember, this is just a sketch. So what happens is I usually start off with a sketch like this, and then I go ahead and grab the inker, which is usually this pen that I use right here. And then I go on top of it and start inking. And you can see it actually feels the depth. When you press down more, you can feel the lines go bigger. And that's on an iPad. It actually works the same way on a phone. It's really interesting. And what's gonna happen now is that I'm gonna go ahead and add a new layer on top of this that is gonna be acting as my inking layer. And that way I'll zoom in a little bit more and make sure that I can capture all the details that I want to capture on him. What's gonna happen, I'm thinking about the light coming from this side, and it's gonna be more bright on this side, and then it's gonna be dark on this side. It's gonna be coming over like right there, so it's gonna be dark here, lit over here. So that means that his shadow has to be running off of him going this way. And that will be important, for example, if we want to make, you know, the a walk cycle out of him, if he wants to blink, if you want to make a head turn and all that stuff, it's going to be important where the shadow faces. You want to be consistent. You want to keep everything really consistent and to the point. So what's going to happen is after this level, I go on to the next level where I actually put another layer on top of that, and I start creating the ink work. This is just a pencil sketch. And let's jump on to the next level now. So I'm going to go ahead over here. For FlipaClip, you know how it works. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to add a layer on top of my layer 1. And where it says 100, I could go ahead and decrease the opacity to about, I usually knock it down to about 45%. So that's about 50, that's about 40%. So 40 is going to be good. And what's going to happen here is that I'll be able to see on top of this sketch, I'll be able to see what's underneath a little bit to guide me while I do my ink work. So I usually bring out the inker. It's that pen over there. And I usually use about 4 points. 4 points is good for a good cartoony line feeling. But you have to be consistent. If you want to have that consistent feeling in all of it, because with a 4, when you press down a little bit, it's going to be kind of, you know, it gets bigger. And when you lift off a little bit, it gets smaller. So what happens is if you want to be consistent, you want to keep it at either 1, a little below 3. If you have a lot of control of your pen, you can put it at 4 and you can see. Press a little bit and the line is smaller. Press a lot and the line is big, just like that. But for consistency here, I'm going to keep it on 3. So we can have kind of a similar line going through the entire work. And later on, when we start dissecting parts and creating different parts, when we think about our animation, then I can come in there and create some lines to have bigger, some lines to be bigger than the others. But what's going to happen now, let's make sure we're on layer 2. And I'm going to rename this. I'm going to call this ink work. Ink work. And I'm going to rename this. To rename the layer, you just go on the layer, make sure you selected that layer that you're supposed to be renaming, and tap on the word layer. And I'm using an iPad, so I just write it down. I'm going to call this my sketch layer. It's very good to rename everything so you can know exactly what you're working with. So I'm going to go on my ink work layer and I'm going to start inking him in. All right, I'm going to try my level best to have a consistent line running through the entire piece. And this is when most of the details are now important. Somebody was asking what my worksheet is, so I'm going to note it down here. I do the sketch first. Actually, let me put all this on its own layer because I don't know how it's going to work later on. But what I usually do is I do the sketch. And then in number 2, I ink. And then number 3, I choose the colors. And then number 4, I go ahead and dissect it. Dissect and prepare for animation. for animation. And after that, my character, anybody who knows how to animate, will be able to use it for animation in different styles. But depending on what I want to animate to, I usually put that into consideration. So I'll actually leave that on. I'm gonna go on my ink work layer and let's start inking him in. So I'm gonna start from the very top, and I'm gonna start with the hair right here. And remember, FlipaClip is a raster program. Raster, you know, when you zoom in like that, you could see the pixels coming out. If you zoom out, it's kind of clean. And when you export, usually your work doesn't have the pixelation like that, but it's a raster program. It's not a vector program, so you should expect to see that, especially if you zoom in a lot, which I love doing, because zooming in gives you a little bit more control, by the way, on how you want your lines to show up. So I'm going to go over there a little bit. I'm going to go on his ear, pull it out, and I have this inner section of the ear right there. The eye. You can see after you have a vivid sketch on ground, it gets easier at this point. If you have a vivid sketch that you really like. Now, if you did not see my recent video that I created, I actually created on how to ink like this, but not with a freehand, where you use all the FlipaClip tools to ink your work, so that way you can have your lines kind of in a perfectionist way. And that way you can create artwork that looks like that it was created in a vector kind of program. But as I always say, it always depends on what kind of shape or what kind of style you're going for in your animation. I kind of like this hand-drawn kind of feeling to work, and I think that's one other strength that FlipaClip has. It gives you that kind of drawing kind of feeling, like traditional animation. Of course, it capitalizes on traditional animation because it's frame by frame, and I love that feeling. So you're gonna find in most of my work, I will leave it just like this. I won't go for the tools, and these are the tools I'm talking about, where you draw a line in a perfection way that you want it, or a circle in a perfection way that you want it. I don't use that sometimes. I want to just use my freehand. And practicing using freehand is actually a good idea. It's actually a very good idea. That's one of the ways your work is going to move from one level to a whole different level. So I actually advise that before you reach for the tools, it would be better to practice, drawing with just your fingers. Have some control of your work. And there's the eye. It's showing up. And as a matter of fact, let me actually experiment with this. So we're going to go ahead and bring out, the paint bucket tool. I'm going to go slow on this one to show you guys. So I was on the inker, and to bring out the paint bucket, you click on the tools icon here, and you can see the paint bucket is right there. To change the color for the paint bucket after you select it, you tap on the color triangle there, and here you can change the paint color to bucket color to any color that you want. This button down here changes the intensity of, or threshold is what they call it, but it's kind of the intensity of how you want to be filling your color. For example, if you fill it in and you see there is these white marks you can see in there, it means it's low, it's on a low threshold. Now if you increase the threshold, say it's on 80 now, and you fill it in, you can see it's filling in everything. You could use that to your advantage. It's not that it's always good, but it's not always bad either. So you have to find a happy medium, but also you have to concentrate on you have to know exactly what you want to be achieving in order to use it rightly. So I'm drawing this other eye here. A little smaller. Remember, it's receding away from us, and I'm filling that in. So that's what I wanted to tell you in the sketch. Remember when I said that part of this is going to be filled in as black, and we're going to have the little eye in there. So kind of his head is kind of done at this point, and we're going to go ahead and start drawing his body. We're going to go ahead and go here onto his shoulder. And I'm going to draw his hand kind of carved in like this. And at this point, I'm not worried about clothing him. This is not the point for this video. We will create another character. We've been creating characters. Remember, if you haven't checked my YouTube out, go ahead and check it out. You'll see the characters that are created fast. I just finished a whole series of creating a character with a blink cycle, so you can go check that out. And this is number 2 series number 2, where we're just creating showing you my process of creating a character. So that's going to be good right there on his belly, popping out a little bit. I like that. He has kind of a pot belly here. And I'm going to go ahead and draw his hand on this side. Still swinging into his body a little bit like that. And his leg comes out of it. Now, I'm not trying to go for any fanciness, trying to see what side is going to be, straight, and the other side that is going to be, creased, all that. I'm just trying to make sure that I create him as symmetrical as possible, because the gist of this video is just to show you guys the steps that I go through when I'm creating a character. I'm going to close that off actually. And I'm going to draw his foot a little bit in the back here. Bring that in. We said we're going to give him some nails on this foot. And this is going to be running out like that. And I'm just going to make 3 of those. I'll join that in case I want to fill it in, for the paint bucket not to be filling in the entire canvas. Bring that over. And you can see he's starting to look really cute. Before even apply any color, he's starting to look a little bit, convincing already. Without even putting in too much thought. No references, just doodling down to show you guys the process I go through when I'm creating a character. And I'm going to close this off as well. And so you can see here on the steps that now we finished the sketching, we finished the inking, and we will be heading for the coloring in now. But after this step here, you can see we have dissecting and preparing for animation. So now we're just drawing on top, but in the dissecting and preparing for animation, we'll be drawing, for example, these shapes inside like that and closing them off. So when you fill this in, it has an entire leg. And when you move it, it's not detaching from one character as a whole. That's what this step is for. But now that we finished that one, I can go ahead. Let me draw these lines here to bring our shadows in, just to indicate where the shadow is going to be. Every little detail matters for when you're doing animation. Every little detail really matters. And so what's going to happen now is I'm going to go here and I'll turn off the sketch. I'll turn off the sketch layer. And to turn the sketch layer off or to decrease, we've already gone through decreasing its opacity. But to turn it off, you just go over there when you zoom in, where it shows the numbers for the opacity intensity, and then you just tap it. When you tap it, it brings this eye that is crossed, meaning it's not visible anymore. And you can toggle turning it back on the same way. Just tap on it and it will go back on. Now, usually coloring, which is where we're going now, I use the paint bucket and then I add highlights using this tool here, which is actually a highlighter. This is what I usually use to add the highlights. And I use this to kind of smudge it in a little bit to give it kind of a painterly feeling. But what's going to happen is we're going to use the paint bucket now. And I'm going to give him kind of a goofy greenish color. So I'm going to go over here into the greens. And I'm going to choose something that is around there. Yeah, that will be good. I'm going to make it a little bit darker. And it's the paint bucket. So what's going to happen is as soon as you tap it, it fills in the entire color. It fills in the entire color. And it's really, really important at this point to have those, just blocky colors in there. So later on, when you go into kind of add highlights or add shadows, you just kind of set that color down a little bit or set it up a little bit, upset it a little bit. And that way you'll have, everything set up. But this is why I was talking about actually, closing off all your shapes when you're drawing, because you see when you go in and tap your ink, your color, it just goes in. It just goes in automatically. It doesn't, if you had not closed in some of those colors, you're going to see it will fill in the entire thing. It will fill in the entire canvas that you're drawing on. And remember, some of the things in FlipaClip cannot be undone. For example, if you mistakenly close in or join all your layers, you're not going to be able to toggle it back. You're not going to be able to undo that. If you delete a layer, you're not going to be able to undo that. So you have to put a couple of things into consideration here. And we're going to go here. We're going to give him some kind of gray fingernails in here. And let's give him a gray nose as well. And now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing highlights and shadows. And those are really, 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 really important. You could see it here. It's still kind of good, but it's not convincing enough. And you want to make sure that when you start giving him the highlights and shadows is when it brings out the three-dimensional kind of quality to it. And that way it makes it feel even more convincing. So what's going to happen, I usually use the select tool. And create my what do you call them, places that I want to put the highlights or places that I want to put the shadows. So we're going to start with the highlights. So what's going to happen, let me actually go to my paint bucket. I'll choose the color. Okay, this is another lesson. If you want to know how to use the color picker to choose the color that you already have on the canvas, you tap this, the eyedropper tool, and you can move it and it will pick up the color that you want, that you've already used in your drawing. So I've picked up the green, and I'm going to go ahead and use a lighter shade of it to put the highlight. So I'm going to go around here. Let me actually see how that looks like. So what's going to happen to check it out, I'm going to use the highlighter, and I'm going to change the color still, the eyedropper tool, go to the color that I want to use to highlight with, and I'm going to give it a little bit of light in there. And you can see that's a little too light, so I'm going to bring it down a notch. Let's see what it looks like. That's good. That's good. It's going to give us a very good, three-dimensional kind of feeling to it. And now what's going to happen, let's go back to our tools, bring the selection tool. So now that we wanted the light to come from this side, we wanted the light to come from this side. This is when it all starts to make sense now. It's going to be light on this side and darker on this side. All right, so let's go ahead and bring the selection tool, and I'm going to select the places that I want to be lit. So I want this area here. Oops, I didn't close that off. You can use the selection tool just like a drawing tool. So you can see that area selected over there. And I'm going to go in here and try to paint over it. I'm going to put my line into consideration, but that will actually all change when we're dissecting the drawing, because what's going to happen is I will have to cut off some of these parts and redraw them and fill them in. And this is the part that I want to be a little bit lighter than the rest of the hand. So I'm going to go ahead and finish it off like that. And you can see now it's starting to have that 3D kind of dimensional quality to it. I'm going to go in here in the hand too. Oops, that's too much. I think my highlight is actually big. It's on 10, so I want to put it on around 6 because it's going out of control. I can't control it when it's that big. See, I have more control now. I'm going to go over here on the side of the ears. And this is when the zooming in helps a lot. Because when you zoom in, you can get to the nitty-gritty of that, the line that you really want to, to concentrate on. And here, I'm going to add a little bit more here on his chin. Oops, that's too angular. A little bit of that. And you can see with just a few highlights, it's already starting to, show some kind of three-dimensional quality to it. Now you can see because this hand is going to be blocking here, so it's going to be a little bit darker here. And as a matter of fact, now we're going to change and go around here is where we're going to put our highlight. A little bit, don't overdo it. The same thing here. And remember, you have to leave space for shadows because we're going to go ahead and bring in the shadows a little bit too. to give it a little bit of a balance. But that just goes in for just adding in a little bit of detail in your character. We're gonna go over here to the nose as well, because the nose is popping out. So I'm gonna put a lot more on here. And that way it will give your character a little bit of, you know, some kind of painterly dimension to it. That's too much. It's cutting across. It's cutting in my line. And I actually think that's good enough. So we're gonna go ahead still with the same color, make it a little bit darker to go for our shadows. And just like the opposite, we had the highlights on the other side. We're gonna have the darks on this side. Just give it a little bit of depth. That's cutting in my line. Just give him a little bit of depth. You can see it right there. Without going too crazy, you know. And to undo, just like in Procreate, you just double tap 2 fingers on the screen. And remember, we said this hand is going to be casting a shadow around this area. So let's work on that around here. Going to be casting a shadow there. Same thing that is going to happen here around his groin area. It's going to be cutting off this area around here. Oops, that's too much. And coming in here. And all these are going to be guides to help me coloring in later even more when dissecting the character and preparing him for animation. So I'm going to go here on the feet. I'm going to add shadows in here as well. Oops, that cut into my line a lot. I'm going to be adding shadows in here as well. Cut into my line over there again. And you can see how 3D kind of feeling it is now, and I think that's actually really interesting. We're gonna go over here, add a little bit more under his chin. Gives it kind of a painterly kind of feeling. Pixelation there is killing me. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. Oops, I drew over his nose. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more so I can have my way with this without eating into my line a lot. I'm going to round this off. It's a round kind of tummy-ish that pandas have, or that our guy here has. And you can see he's starting to look a lot, you know, 3-dimensional without us doing even a lot, but just putting a few marks and knowing exactly where to put them. He's becoming a lot three-dimensional that way. And you can see now that we're just patching off our colors to know exactly where we want what. It doesn't matter. We can eat up our line a little bit. But what's going to happen when we're dissecting and recreating him to make him ready for animation is when we're going to be drawing. For example, we could easily have made it easier if we were drawing this on a different layer. For example, a layer underneath the line layer. It will be so much easier. If I could show you that, say if you go here on the layers and add a new layer and you're drawing underneath the line layer, look how easy that will be without eating into our line. But we're going to do that after we dissect him and prepare him ready for animation, and we're redrawing the entire character is when we're going to go into that, and it will be so much easier. But this is good enough to show us where we want our colors to be. We're going to go ahead and add shadows in the nails as well. So I'm going to go ahead and choose the color, my color picker, pick the nail in the colors, and make a darker version of it. Go over to my nails. How comes that did not work? Make it a little darker. Oh, sorry, we're drawing on a different layer. That's very important. So we're going to delete that. Remove. They ask you because when you do that, you're not going to be able to undo it. When you delete a layer in FlipaClip, you're not going to be able to undo it. So that's very important. That's why they keep asking you, are you sure you want to undo this? So that's actually a lot darker. So we're going to put that over there. Not too much, just a little bit. Not going too crazy with it. And making our life way harder during, animation. Remember, if you plan out your character well, the more you plan it out well is the easier it's going to be during animation. So his nose is done. His nails are kind of done. I'm showing you a little bit of a cheat there to put a little bit of, to polish up a little bit to make the nails even more shiny. You can add a different color in the highlights. But we will go for all this when we are actually finishing it off for animation and creating the final touches to make it even more believable. And so you can see there we are. Our character is almost done. And he looks pretty good if you'd ask me. He looks good for a fresh character that we're just creating, and we're gonna work on him even further to create a more believable character. So what's gonna happen, I'm gonna go ahead and close this off for the shadow, and I'll bring in our paint bucket. Oops, it's on green. We're gonna change the color for that, and we're gonna fill it in. Oops. We filled in the line. That's what caused that. And you can see that looks pretty good. So we're gonna go here in the white section, and we're gonna add some darkness to it too, so it doesn't just look like a window looking through his soul. So we're gonna go ahead and bring that, and we're gonna go ahead and change it to, so I'm just gonna use the color picker so we have the same kind of colors all through the work. That's too dark. You can also play around with how dark you want it by just decreasing its opacity. Yeah, that will be good. So I just decreased its opacity, and I think it was on the wrong side, so I gotta put it on this side over here like this. And I gotta fill it in. So I'm not gonna use the paint bucket on this. I'm just gonna use a little bit of shading like this because I like the effect that it actually is giving me over there. So I'm gonna go ahead and just draw it in like that. And there we go. All right, so to make our character pop off the screen even better, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead. I'm gonna turn this off. I'm gonna turn this off, and I'm gonna delete this, just so we have only our character on the canvas. And I'm gonna go ahead and give our background a different kind of color. To do that, I'm gonna tap the three dots, project settings, and I'm gonna go over to my color, and I'll give it a different kind of color. I'll make it all white. Or to do that differently, I'm going to show you another method you could use to fill in your background. Since our character is already filled in, we could just go to the paint bucket, choose a custom color that we want our background to look like, and just tap on the background and fill it in. That way you can change the color of the background as well without going into the project settings. And so that is our character right now, guys. So what's gonna happen in the next video, or next time I go live, what's gonna happen, we're gonna come back to him and we're gonna be going for this other layer right here, which is going to be dissecting him and making him ready for animation. Dissecting and making him ready for animation. That's going to be our next part, guys. And when I come back, we just created him. That way we're going to just be cutting him into pieces and making sure that the parts that are going to be moving when we're creating the animation are going to be able to be moved and then left over there, and then, you know, tagged around while we add you know, different kind of keyframes. And I'll show you how to do that. And I think with this character, we're going to do a little bit of a blink, and we're going to make him, we can make him move his ears. We can make him walk. We can make him run. He is in shape to do everything that we want, especially after we prepare him for animation. So I see I have 3 people on now. Thank you, Eden. Thank you, Android Games. Who's the other person watching? Let me see. I can't figure out to see who the other person who's watching. But yeah, thank you so much, guys, for watching, and I hope to see you again tomorrow while we are actually cutting him up for animation and preparing him for animation. Thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.